At 12:07 a.m. the garage door creaked and woke me. They assumed I was asleep. They always assumed that. At 71 your hearing learns to travel through walls, especially when you've become someone other people can ignore in their own home. Before I could even prop myself up, the basement door eased open. Heavy, male footsteps. The sour scent of old beer reached me before his voice did. "Mom, get up." Not a please. He hadn't used that word in years. He came with his wife, Dana, who said nothing. She held a little flashlight beneath her chin and looked like a character in a kid's ghost tale. The light threw hard shadows across her face and showed her plainly for who she was. They wouldn't let me put my shoes on. He seized my elbow, not cruel, but far from gentle, and hauled me up the stairs and through the back door into the chilly night. From the yard, I saw the kitchen glow through the curtains and the table I'd chosen from a catalog back when catalogs still arrived. They pushed me into the garage. I say pushed because I didn't go willingly. My knees were weak and I had no fight left in me. But I didn't resist. They'd set a chair under the bare bulb, my porch chair. The one my husband built before his heart stopped one April morning 15 years ago, and made it the focal point of whatever they had planned. "Sit," my son ordered. When I hesitated, Dana stepped forward, clutching something I couldn't make out, the way she gripped it tightening my stomach. I sat. They lashed my wrists to the armrests, cords taken from the extension cords he kept in his toolbox. I looked at him, the child I once fed canned soup and knitted mittens for, and he couldn't hold my gaze. Dana opened a folder. "You're gonna sign this," she said, flipping it open so I could read General Power of AT to Orano across the top. "Sign, or we'll make you wish you had," she added, voice flat and practiced. I didn't ask for clarification. The faint chemical tang of gasoline answered for them. He'd poured a little, not enough to douse the whole place, only enough to intimidate. I didn't scream, cry, or beg. They wanted terror, but terror is the currency of the young. At my age, what more could they take? I looked at the paper again and spoke in a dry, steady voice. "You think that will give you the house?" I asked. Dana's perfume smelled of lilies, a scent I once loved, now loathed. "You'll sign or burn," she repeated slowly. Then I started to laugh. It was a low, tired sound that surprised us all. For a heartbeat, they looked less like villains and more like teens caught doing something shameful. "Why are you laughing?" he demanded. I met his face and said the first blunt, honest thing I had dared say in years. "Because you assume the house belongs to you." He blinked, confused. "Not yet? Not until you sign," he stammered. "No," I cut in. "It hasn't been yours since Monday." His expression flickered between disbelief and fear. Dana's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" I lifted my chin. I had already signed the house over, but not to them. He moved closer. "To who?" he asked. I gave a smile that didn't touch my eyes, the kind of small, private smile that holds a decade and a half of silences and the memory of a single long afternoon at a lawyer's office. In that exact moment the sirens started. They had missed the panic button I'd ducked, taped beneath the old porch chair. They hadn't noticed the emergency pendant I still wore under my nightgown, the one they assumed I'd long forgotten how to use. I'd pressed it before they finished tying the second knot. Red and blue lights painted the garage windows. My son swore. Dana let the folder drop. I sat very still as the front door slammed open and officers shouted. The boy I had rocked through fevers at 3 was pushed up against the garage wall and cuffed. One of the officers asked if I was all right. For the first time in a long time I could honestly answer, "I am now." I'd been relegated to the basement after Harold died. It didn't happen in a single violent shove, it happened slowly, politely. Just for a short while. My son had said, glancing at their cramped living room. "Until the renovations are done." Renovations that never came. That was 3 years ago. They moved me downstairs with promises of an in-law suite, while Dana already pictured her craft room upstairs. I didn't protest. I was grieving and still gullible for hope. I tried to make the space bearable, a lamp, some pinned-up photos, a little nest of familiarity. But the air stayed damp, the light always weak, the mattress a sagging lump. They never insulated the ceiling, so I learned every footstep, every slammed cabinet, every argument above. Sometimes I heard them laughing, never including me. Dana drifted past the basement entrance in heels and a phone call, sniffing as though I were a problem she'd rather not touch. Harold used to say I was his anchor. They made me feel like ballast. It was more than the relocation. It was the steady drip of small cruelties. A meal forgotten, a birthday passed in silence, a thank you left unsaid. A slow leak that eats away at a house's bones. I learned not to come upstairs unless invited, not to speak unless spoken to. I learned to accept scraps and smile as if they were a feast. They had ways to remind me of my place. "Did you shower today?" Dana would ask, tilting her head and sniffing. "You shouldn't watch the news," my son said once, switching channels like I was a child who shouldn't be exposed to hard things. And then there were the meds. They always told me, "We're doing what's best for you." That sentence became a mantra, a careful little lie that, in their mouths, meant a single 40-watt bulb, a bare cement floor, and a space heater I had to switch off at night so the breakers wouldn't trip. No one asked if I was cold. Even in the basement, you noticed the small betrayals. I noticed when my bank card stopped working. "We moved your account into joint management for convenience," Dana said. I noticed when letters stopped arriving to my name. "We'll handle anything important." "Mom," I noticed when I was no longer trusted with my own prescriptions. "You're forgetful lately," they said. And I heard the quiet conversations behind closed doors, hushed words about liabilities, estate plans, and the house. That house was ours, bought with Harold's pension and my sewing wages, mortgage paid off the autumn of '94 with lemonade on the porch to celebrate. They hadn't built it, hadn't earned it, but they acted like it already belonged to them. One Sunday afternoon, when the heater had conked out and my fingertips were numb, I crept upstairs to warm myself. I shouldn't have been there. I stood in the hallway, deciding whether to knock, and overheard them. "It's not enough that she's here again. Now she wants a say in the bills," Dana snapped. "We should wait until the papers go through," my son replied. I edged closer. "She won't even notice?" Dana said. "We'll tell her it's for taxes." Then a sentence that broke something in me. "She owes us for everything." I slid back down the stairs, and the chill didn't feel quite as sharp after that. That night I opened the old trunk hidden beneath my cot. Inside were Harold's papers, a few faded deeds, and a notarized copy of our living trust. The year before, after talking with a woman at the senior center who'd been through a similar erosion of dignity, I'd quietly updated the trust. "You want to die in your own bed, not someone else's basement," she told me. So I acted. The house was no longer in both our names. It was in mine alone. After my appointment with Francis the lawyer, it was placed into an irrevocable trust solid, designed so nobody could swipe it if they tried to trick me into signing something. 3 days after that, they presented the power of attorney. Dana smiled and said it was for medical decisions. I asked for time. That was the last morning I was allowed upstairs. They thought they knew what I would do. They thought I was too frail to remember my own name. They underestimated 2 small things: the panic button ducked, taped under my porch chair, and the emergency pendant I still wore beneath my nightgown. I hit the pendant the night they tied me to the chair in the garage. Sirens painted the garage windows red and blue. Their plans unraveled in the flash of police lights. My son swore. Dana dropped the folder. Officers cuffed him, the child I'd rocked through fevers, against the garage wall. When they asked if I was all right, I found I could answer honestly for the first time in years. I am now. Being shoved to the basement after Harold died hadn't been a single violent act. It had been polite, plausible steps. Just until we get renovations done, they promised, renovations that never came. The basement smelled damp, the mattress sagged, and the ceiling wasn't insulated, so I heard every footstep, every slammed door above. Sometimes they laughed upstairs, never with me. Dana walked past in heels, clipped phone calls trailing behind her, as if I were an invisible thing that needed occasional care. Small cruelties piled up until they became the whole of my life. Forgotten birthdays, meals that didn't materialize, a missing thank you, the slow erosion of being seen. They started making decisions without me: what to watch, what to eat, where my things belonged. Then they called my memory unreliable. Then they decided I was too much trouble. And finally the mail stopped bearing my name. I kept a notebook. At first it wasn't for revenge. It was a ledger of survival. Every change in medication, every unexplained bank withdrawal, every time a prescription was missed, every holiday I was left home alone, I wrote it down. They aimed to confuse me, to strip me of confidence until I'd sign anything just to be included. But memory can be armor. Remembering saved me. Harold used to say people don't change, they only drop their mask when they think you won't fight back. I didn't want to believe it about my son, but Harold was rarely wrong. I fed that boy, stitched his clothes, sat up nights with him through illnesses, and covered the mortgage when he and his wife were between jobs. I told myself, it's what mothers do. I never imagined he'd one day bind me to a chair. When I decided to act, I collected the evidence, the deed, the trust papers, copies of unauthorized withdrawals, all sealed in an envelope. I walked across the yard in the dark to my neighbor Myra's house. Myra, 83, sharp as a tack, with a cranky dachshund and a memory like a ledger clerk, took the envelope without question. If anything happens, give them to Officer Green, I told her. She nodded once. Women our age know. After the police took them away that night, they brought me back upstairs. The kitchen was still Harold's yellow. I caught my reflection in the microwave door and saw a tired woman, but with eyes that were clear and awake for the first time in years. The officers mentioned a protective order. I told them I'd think about it. What I didn't say out loud, not yet, was that I had already done something more permanent. Tomorrow my lawyer would deliver notice to their holding cell, the legal word that the house no longer belonged to them, could no longer be used as leverage. Upstairs was mine again. Downstairs was empty. I sit now in my chair, the one Harold built, sipping tea from my blue-rimmed cup. There is a kind of peace in the ordinary things, a kettle's hiss, sunlight on the table we picked together, the hum of the fridge. It's not revenge I wanted. It's simply the right to live where I belong. The notice would tell them they had 30 days to collect their things, under police watch. And it would tell them something more important, that the woman they called weak had just removed them from her life. Not because of bitterness, not because of vengeance, but because of dignity, a word they never valued, but one I had never forgotten. The first thing I registered in the garage wasn't the gasoline. That came later. It was the reek of old oil ground into the floor. Years of anger pressed into the concrete like a stain no scrubbing could erase. The second thing was the silence. They moved around me, tying, looming, waiting, but hardly spoke. A nod, a glance, a grimace. Soldiers who thought the battle was already theirs. Dana tightened the rope around my wrist. Her nails were painted a hard, glossy red, the kind that signaled power, not beauty. You'll sign, she said. I didn't reply. My son fumbled with the folder. The way a boy stares at unfinished homework. He held a pen, but didn't offer it. Not yet. They wanted me to beg first. They wanted to hear me crack. But I sat still, feet freezing against the cement, and stared at them both. You think this is going to work? I asked, quietly. Dana smirked, her lip twitching. We're not asking, Laura. There it was. Not Mom, not Mame, just Laura, the last mask gone. He stepped forward. My son. The baby I once rocked in a trailer when money was so scarce I watered down milk to stretch it. He looked taller in that moment, but smaller too, thinned out by cruelty. You're not well, he said, voice hollow with memorized lines. You've been forgetting. Bill's mail. Even leaving the stove on, lies rehearsed. Dana nodded from behind me, her tone a perfect mix of pity and menace. This is just precaution. If you love us, you'll sign. Love. The chain they always used to pull me forward. Love. The word they poisoned until it meant obedience. I glanced at the paper. Power of attorney. Control of everything. No limits. You're trying to erase me, I said, gravel in my throat. You want the house. The savings. My silence. My eyes turned to Dana. And you're counting on me being too afraid to say no. She stepped closer with the pen. The garage air went still. That's when I pressed the button taped to my wrist. Myra's niece, who worked at a care home, once taught, keep your alarm where no one sees it. Press it before it's too late. So I had pressed it the moment they tied my hands. You're stalling, Dana hissed. I smiled. You're sweating. Then the first flash of red and blue broke across the window glass. Silent at first. Then sirens split the night. My son froze, mouth open. Dana backed away. Did you? She started, but the front door burst wide. Boots, voices, lights. Too late for raised hands, still tied to the chair. I closed my eyes and exhaled. Not luck, not mercy, preparation. The officers cut the cords, a medic checked my wrists. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I looked at my son on the floor, cuffed, Dana shouting uselessly at a sergeant. Yes, I said, not for revenge, but because you can't end a war by pretending it never existed. But dawn I was upstairs again. Not a guest, not a burden. Home, in my bed, in my name. They were the ones in a cell, where silence belonged to them now. They never knew I still had the papers. That makes me smile, not out of spite, but clarity. They thought age had erased me, thought I'd lost the thread, but the proof sat neatly in a kitchen drawer labeled coupons. Inside the deed in my name. The trust papers, my lawyer's notarized letter, copies of every check I wrote to cover their bills and loans, each unpaid debt, every broken promise. I hadn't kept those for war. I'd kept them because I knew peace built on lies would never last. I remembered when Dana tried to refinance the house, laying papers on my table like crayons for a child. Just sign here, she said, voice syrupy. Something in her eyes told me no. So I didn't. That same night I overheard her whisper that I was slipping. That paranoia made me difficult. Soon after, my son appeared with a list of new medications. That was the week they stopped calling me Mom. So I found a lawyer they didn't know. Samuel Graves, who wore tweed and listened without interrupting. I brought everything, old deeds, bank slips, even sticky notes with Dana's careless words. He asked if I wanted safety or revenge. Safety, I said. He nodded. Together we rewrote everything, restructured the trust, removed my son as proxy, sealed the house under my sole authority. Quietly, carefully. When I came home that day, they were picking countertops, planning remodels with money they thought was theirs. My son waved a form. I thought we agreed, he said. I told him the house was no longer shared, just a flicker across his face, but enough. That wasn't the plan, he muttered. His plan, not mine. The kindness that followed was thin and false. Power shoot-offs, missing pills, misplaced mail, hints about communities, with structure. Each step meant to make me surrender. But I had a safe, tucked behind holiday boxes, filled with what mattered. And a second copy with Myra, who understood without asking. So when they came with gasoline and rope, I knew the charade was over. But I wasn't afraid. Everything they thought they owned had already slipped beyond their reach. The officers asked if I had proof. I pulled the blue folder from the wreath box. Signed, dated, undeniable. The young cop's eyes widened. Ma'am, he said softly. This changes everything? Yes, it did. He only called me Mom when he wanted something, a password, a favor. Cat sitting. But never to ask how I was. Never to check if I was warm in the basement. That week he called twice, too polite, too careful. I heard the setup in every word. And I knew long before the garage. Because the truth is, my son stopped being mine the day he stopped seeing me as anything but an obstacle. And I stopped being theirs the moment I decided I wasn't going to disappear quietly. Later, I noticed the pitcher still sitting on the counter, beads of condensation sliding down its side. No one had touched it. That small neglect festered into something heavier, a silence that lingered. He stopped inviting me to gatherings with his coworkers, telling me I'd be bored. He stopped asking for my opinion, saying I wouldn't understand. But the requests for money came back, dressed in the same word, temporary. Except temporary stretched on until it was permanent. That last Christmas together under one roof, I placed a gift on their bed, a wrap box holding a $5,000 check. Not because I wanted to, but because I still clung to the foolish hope it might soften them. The next morning, there was no thank you. Only Dana, wrinkling her nose at the scent of candles I'd lit, muttering that the house smelled like age. That's when I understood I wasn't seen as a mother anymore. I was a resourced. A wallet. Resources have limits and terms can change. That Monday, before the garage, I called Mr. Graves again. I'd like to update my emergency contact, I told him. From your son, he asked gently. Yes, from both of them. He didn't pry, only said, understood. When the police arrived that night, they asked if there was someone I wanted to reach. I gave them Aloysa's number, my niece's daughter, who still called every Sunday just to hear my voice. My son and Dana thought I was fading, a burden on borrowed time. But I was a ledger, full of records they had never finished reading. And now, finally, the balance had shifted. I don't remember exactly when I bought the red folder. Probably a dollar store errand, back when it still carried that name. It was nothing special plastic, flimsy with 2 pockets and no spine. But I liked the color. It reminded me of autumn tomatoes, of the coat I wore the day Harold proposed. That folder became my archive. I tucked it away in the buffet cabinet, under potholders no one bothered with anymore. They assumed I'd stopped cooking. They assumed I'd stopped doing. But I hadn't. Every time Dana shoved a bill toward me with a careless, "Just pay it," I made a copy and filed it. Each time my son borrowed from my savings, I noted the date and the amount. Extra grocery runs, co-pays, favors that became debts, logged, printed, and stored. At first it wasn't anger that drove me. It was record, keeping, a way to watch how quickly affection eroded when tested by greed. Charlotte at the bank suspected something. She was young, hair always neat, eyeliner too sharp, but her eyes were kind. She helped me reset my pay one afternoon and frowned at the screen. "You've got a lot of linked accounts," she said carefully. "Would you like to review them?" She clicked through utilities, insurance, 2 auto payments for a veterinary clinic. They didn't even have a pet. "And here's a transfer." "Oh, sorry, that must be your family." It was, for the moment. That night, I sat on the edge of my cot, folder open on my lap. Page after page, the truth tallied itself. Over 70,000 since Harold died, money given, bills covered, accounts drained. In return, a cot in a damp basement, dim light, missing medicine, and last week, the reek of gasoline. The next morning, I took the folder in my purse and caught the first bus to town. I didn't tell them. If Dana had driven me, she'd have asked too many questions. If my son knew, he'd have pressed for answers. At the bank, Charlotte smiled. "I'd like to make some changes," I told her. And I did. I closed every automatic payment, canceled every linked card, removed Dana as an authorized user, printed every record. Then I opened a new account, offline, private, untouchable. Into it I placed not only money, but the last of my independence. Then I went to Mr. Graves. He read each page of the folder slowly, carefully. When he finished, he asked, "Do you want to press charges?" "Not yet," I said. He nodded. "But I do want eviction proceedings. And I want the trust amended." "What kind of amendment?" "That they inherit nothing. No money, no property, not even a photograph." He didn't blink. "I can do that. There's a freedom in the word no. It's final. A full stop, a door closing." For years, my reflex was yes. Yes, out of love, guilt, fear, habit. But now the choice was mine, and the door shut with my hand on the knob. When I returned, Dana was laughing into the phone in the kitchen, that hollow laugh she wore like perfume. She glanced at my purse. "You were out," she said. "I was," I replied. And nothing more. That was new. Later that night, my son knocked on the basement door but didn't come down. "Hey," he said softly. "Everything okay?" "Dana said you were gone all day." "I'm fine," I answered. A pause. "We should talk soon about the future." I smiled in the dark. "We will," I thought. "But not the way you expect." They didn't notice. My thumb pressed the button in the lull. When Dana flipped a page. When my son exhaled like I was nothing but a disappointment. They turned their heads for a second, and I clicked it. Barely a sound, softer than a nail tapping fabric, but to me it was thunder. The call center rang back in under a minute. I stayed silent. That silence told the system everything. It triggered a duress alert. At 12:16 a.m. a patrol car was already on its way. By 12:20 Myra's urgent voice pushed them faster. The first officer through the garage looked no older than my granddaughter. His hand hovered near his holster, but his eyes were kind. "Mom," he asked, "are you hurt?" I couldn't answer. Dana did. "This is just a mistake." He cut her short. "I'm speaking to the woman tied to the chair." I lifted my head. "They tried to make me sign over my house." His eyes followed the cord at my wrists, the spilled gasoline, the open folder. He turned to my son. Step back, hands visible. Chaos followed. Dana arguing, my son stammering excuses. But there was video. There were burns in the wood from gasoline, bruises on my skin, and the panic button still pressed flat. The truth was no longer deniable. They'd crossed a line no family name could cover. At the station, I sat in a pale room, styrofoam cup in hand, across from Officer Hernandez. Calm, steady, writing everything down. Did they ever threaten you? No. Did you feel unsafe? I felt unwanted. Did you tell anyone? I hesitated. No. But I left a note. Her pen stilled. What kind of note? In the pantry, behind the flour tin, 6 weeks ago. After they tampered with my medicine, it begins. If something happens to me, it wasn't an accident. She sent someone to find it. When she returned, her voice was softer. You're not the first. Financial abuse, control, neglect, we see it. But few people ever speak. I understood why. For years I'd feared no one would believe me, that they'd dismiss me as confused, clumsy, forgetful. But now the evidence was weightier than their lies. By 4 a.m., they let me go home. To my room, my bed, my house. The door had been left wide open in the rush. I locked it myself and stood still, listening. No voices above me, no footsteps, no Dana, no sun. Only silence, the kind you fight for. The officer who first doubted me returned the next day. His skepticism had been clear. The way he glanced at my papers like they were ramblings. But when I laid out the deeds, the trust, the bank transfers, his expression shifted. Clouds parting. He realized I wasn't confused. I was prepared. They tied you, he asked quietly. Yes. And poured gasoline. Yes. And tried to force you to sign. Yes. He leaned back. Do you want to press charges? I already did, I said, when I refused to sign. From then on, it was formal photos of my wrists, samples of fuel. The chair tagged as evidence. That garage became a crime scene. The altar where my family thought they could sacrifice me. But I didn't burn. Court came quickly. Bail denied. Charges filed: elder abuse, attempted coercion, unlawful restraint. They still believed they could talk their way out. That I'd stay quiet. That I hadn't changed. But I had. I'd changed the locks. I'd changed my will. And I'd changed myself. In court, I spoke plainly. I gave them everything. When that wasn't enough, they came for what remained. They didn't want love. They wanted control. And when I refused, they tried to take it. I didn't need sympathy. I needed safety. And I needed them to understand one thing: I will not be erased. That night, in my own kitchen, I boiled water for tea. Sunlight touched my hands. I opened the newspaper, not to read, just to savor the quiet. For the first time in years, I breathed freely. 2 weeks later, his letter arrived. Careful handwriting. No apology, only explanations. Stress, bills, Dana's pressure. He wrote, I should have stopped it. But he didn't write, I'm sorry I tied you up. At the bottom, I hope someday we can talk. I folded it small and fed it to the fire. Silence followed. A true silence, filled with clinking teacups, the hum of the heater, the scrape of a chair. Silence that belonged to me. I took down their wedding photo. In its place, I hung one of Harold and me, grinning with melting ice cream in hand. That picture had hidden in a drawer for 15 years. Now it lived in the light. The basement was cleared, the cot thrown away, insulation added, a sewing table set up, the machine oiled and ready. Neighbors came by with casseroles, flowers, questions left unasked. Myra brought pie and whiskey. Not till the last leaf falls. She winked. I opened the window at night again. For years I'd feared the cold, the noise, the unknown. Now the breeze reminded me of something simple: air belongs to no one. Not sons, not daughters-in-law, not fear. One night I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and sat on the porch with a notebook. I wrote my name at the top, Laura Bennett, and under it, just one line. I am still here, not poetry, not clever, but true, and truth can be a roof when you've lived without one for too long. The wind kept coming. So did the stillness. So did the peace. And slowly, so did I, back into myself. Not suddenly, but the way breath returns or tea cools by a window, or a woman finds her voice after years of being silenced. People think when something terrible ends, relief fills the space like rushing water. It doesn't. What comes first is quiet. A strange quiet where you keep listening for footsteps on the ceiling, for keys at a door, for voices claiming a home that isn't theirs anymore. For days after the ruling, I kept catching myself listening, mid-step, mid-pour, mid-thought. But the house stayed empty, empty of them, empty of their shadows, and slowly I understood they weren't just gone from the rooms. They were gone from me. I relearned small things, cooking for one, not with sorrow but with care, carrots peeled slowly, Soup simmering on the stove instead of microwaved. Bread toasted golden, not charred. A plate set properly, not just a napkin tossed on the counter. It felt silly at first, but dignity often starts in a kitchen, with the way you feed yourself when no one's watching. I built a rhythm, mornings with tea and crosswords on the porch. Afternoons in the basement, my workshop now, warm and bright. Evenings curled under a blanket with a book I'd forgotten enough to enjoy again. I wasn't lonely, I was alone. There's a difference. Myra dropped by every Tuesday. She never stayed long, said she didn't want to smother, but she always brought something. Biscuits, gossip, a smile. Once she handed me a tin box. "For your next red folder," she said. I told her I hoped I wouldn't need one. She replied, "No one hopes to. You prepare anyway." And she was right. One Sunday I traced the property line. Harold used to do that every spring, checking gates, patching fences. I hadn't in years. But that morning, with dew on the grass and soft sun on my back, I pulled on boots and walked the edges of my life. Past the hydrangeas, past the patch of dirt they once called worthless. It was worth it. Even the weeds belonged to me now. Behind the pines, I found the shed collapsing on itself. Dana's idea for storage. They never fixed the roof. Now it leaned like an old man with bad knees. I didn't feel angry. I laughed, loud and real. Even their neglect had an expiration date. I hired a retired contractor to replace it with a greenhouse. "I only take jobs I want," he said. "So do I answered. By month's end it stood finished cedar frame, sunlight pouring in. I didn't plant anything that day. I just stood inside breathing. People asked if I'd heard from them. I hadn't, and I didn't want to. Prison might change them, but I didn't need them changed. I needed them gone. Another letter came. This one I didn't open. Straight to the trash. Not everything deserves a second reading. Instead, I began writing letters of my own. To old friends, cousins, women at the senior center I'd avoided out of shame. They wrote back about gardens, grandchildren, aching knees, quiet mornings. I told them I was sewing again, that I wasn't cold anymore, that the house was truly mine. Because healing isn't always a rescue. Sometimes it's a return, not to the old life, but to the one you were always meant to have. Now when the wind rattles the porch trees, I don't flinch. I don't wait for keys in locks or voices twisting my name into an order. There is no one above me now. Only sky. Then came the envelope. Heavy, cream-colored, stamped by the courthouse. My lawyer called it confirmation. I called it freedom. I signed for it, boiled the kettle, and opened it at the same table where Dana once told me to stop worrying. 2 pages. Double-spaced. Legal language, but plain enough. All rights of occupancy, ownership, access, and claim to 114 Meadow Lane are irrevocably granted to Laura J. Bennett as sole owner. No appeal, no contest, no loophole, just mine. I ran my finger along the paper's edge. It carried a weight no scale could measure. The weight that says breathe now. I walked through each room that afternoon, not to inspect, but to claim. The kitchen tile glowing in the light. The couch where I now read instead of worrying. The basement door that no longer locked from the outside. The garage swept clean, each corner whispering you survived. I hung one more photo, me holding my son as a baby. For years I thought taking it down meant healing. Now I know real healing means keeping it up, without letting it punish me. You don't erase the love. You just stop letting it own you. That night Myra brought champagne, the cheap kind with a plastic cork. "We're toasting anyway," she said. We sat on the porch in the good chairs, glasses raised. "Feels different," she said. "It is," I answered. She asked if I'd changed my will. I told her yes. Everything to a women's shelter, and a scholarship for girls who've lost too much time being quiet. She nodded. "That's better than revenge." "It isn't revenge," I said. "It's balance." The stars came out. I pulled the blanket close. I told her I thought I'd feel sad. I didn't. I felt empty, but in a clean way. Like a cleared room waiting for what I chose to put in it. And for the first time in years, the choice was mine. Because survival isn't just staying alive. It's staying yours. If you're reading this and some part of you acts in recognition, hear me, you are not too old, too broken, too late. If you are afraid in your own home, if your voice shrinks around people who claim to love you, if you've stopped saying your own name, it's not too late to take it back. Gather the papers. Write the letter. Call the lawyer. Press the button. No one may come to rescue you. That's not the tragedy. That's the power. Because when you rescue yourself, when you stand in the fire and say no more, when you shut the door behind them and whisper this life is mine again, that is more than survival. That is victory. So if these words mean something to you, pass them on. To someone tired, to someone quiet, to someone who thinks they need permission to live. They don't. And neither do you, because I am still here, and so are you.